favorite soft drink and a creamy smooth Dairy Queen Ice Milk Sundae. Bite into a great deal, the hamburger full meal deal, and you'll taste why. In the land of Dairy Queen,
bastard.
Looking for gift ideas for the little ones?
Here's one. I'll tell little Freddie it's a scarf.
Canadian Tire has some better gift ideas.
Like this lovable Baby Alive doll for just $21.88. And this complete Knight Rider crash set with car, truck, and ramp for only $17.77.
If I can save that much at Canadian Tire, I'll get toys for the kids.
That's the spirit, Ebenezer.
I'll tell Uncle Jack it's a scarf.
Canadian Tire lets you give like Santa
And save like Scrooge.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. Operation Solidarity and the BC Fed allegedly stands poised for job action and who knows, a general strike if the demands of the BC Teachers Federation are not met. I've gone over this in spades. Anybody who's following it knows the situation, despite the confusion over the Monroe-Bennett agreement at Kelowna. One thing is clear, and I want to draw your attention to a full-page ad in the province this morning, headed 18 million. And the first 4 points, I have no argument, but the fifth point says, teachers want the 18 million to be spent to maintain the services to students provided by the 600 education workers who face termination. And then it says Bill Bennett has broken his agreement. Far be it from me to give comfort and aid to Bill Bennett in the chintzy way that this has been handled, but one thing is lucidly clear from the broadcast with Bennett on November the 18th and from everything else said. Bennett's position is that the money saved due to the non-attendance at school by teachers cannot be used to save jobs. Give him that much. He made that perfectly clear. The money saved must be used in the system to supply the tuition to the kids who missed it. And when the Teachers Federation say Bill Bennett has broken his agreement, I must respectfully disagree and say that their advertisement, to say the least, is misleading. Nothing, however, should still stop a common sense solution. But it cannot be helped by the teachers saying that they want the money to save terminations, 600, which they know perfectly well have been brutally, frankly, and upfront planned by Bennett and his minions. So don't be fooled by that ad, whatever else you're fooled by. Now, the other day on this program, I had an unusual guest called Joseph Pinciota. And he is, or claims to be, a face reader. Here is a face he saw, and here is how he read it.
Again, right side of the mouth is activated. We have a saleswoman. We have a very broad jaw. I cannot move this person off position. We have pride into the excess. We have an organizational capacity that steps on everybody. We have a person who socially is very nice to be with when she wants to, and when she cuts it off, you are just gone. The pride and the ease with which this woman expresses how she thinks it ought to be done can go very far, provided, now this I don't know, what her model of the world is. That is, I don't know what map she's following from looking at her face. I know that whatever she's following, she has her feet on the ground as far as she's concerned, closely rooted and extremely prideful.
I trust you will forgive me, Iona Campagnolo, for using that visual character reading of you. I thought it was really quite praiseworthy and remarkably accurate. And we're going to be talking to Iona Campagnolo, the leader of what's left of the Liberal Party of Canada. president, oh my goodness, my subconscious is showing again, the president of the Liberal Party of Canada. On the program this morning, and I hope we have some trouble, is a proponent for co-op housing by the name of Mayor Michael Harcourt of the city of Vancouver, and an opponent of certain scams, I suspect, in co-op housing by the name of Bill Kennedy of QDAC. Because as you know, Mayor Farrell set the cat among the pigeons by pointing out in the Vancouver Sun that fancy, highly paid CMHC officials were living in what people think is housing for people with low incomes. And then later in the program this morning, a very distinguished guest, Paul Martin, diplomat, statesman, sometime politician, on his particular book, A Very Public Life. But first, the Campagnolo person, after the break. The Globe and Mail describes Iona Campagnolo as a rare Liberal star in a political wasteland. How long have you been president of the party now?
1 year as of November 7th.
How much debt was the party in when you took over?
A lot.
What does the debt stand at now?
80% less.
Do you go to big business to get the money and say, I want $100,000 to help the Liberals out the hole for the next election?
No. When the Election Expenses Act came in 1976, a decision was made in our party to put most of the money at the constituency level, and no provision was made for the national level of the party. They said, oh, well, they'll get their money out of big dinners and so on. Well, it was like the ugly stepchild of the whole operation, because everyone presumably had responsibility, but nobody took responsibility. So now I've worked out a final program that'll be possible for the national level to be funded, but I've raised the money out of the constituency level and through the rank and file of the party everywhere in the country. There are 282 ridings, and I think I've been to about 200 of them.
What are the dates in the spring for which you have booked the Ottawa Civic Centre for your leadership convention?
That's a lie. Nobody's booked anything.
Is that an outright lie?
Absolutely.
My understanding was that the National Liberal Party has tentatively booked dates in the Ottawa Civic Centre for February.
Just that usual bunch of garbage that comes out of Ottawa. Nobody's booked anything, nor would they, until the flag is dropped.
I didn't pick that up in Ottawa. I picked it up very recently at a luncheon, but that's beside the point. I didn't pick it up from you.
It was wrong.
Wrong. And are you booking it for?
No, I'm booking nothing. When the Prime Minister drops the flag, if he does, then we'll make plans accordingly. And
you wouldn't hold it in Toronto. You haven't booked it in Toronto. No.
Me and Harold Ballard, can't you see that?
No, because when do you anticipate, and you are very frank and blunt about this, when do you anticipate that Mr. Trudeau will step down? In this month or next month?
Jack, I've learned a great deal about the Prime Minister, and one thing I've learned is never speculate on him. Just when you think you've figured out the whole thing, you're absolutely wrong and he goes in another direction. There will be no plans made. I don't speculate. He has said that it was not his intention to run again. He told Richard Gwynn the other day he'd make up his mind in a couple of months. And that's all I have to go on, just like anyone else.
All right, now, but you are readying for a leadership convention next year. He must resign next year, mustn't he?
Must he?
Well, look at the polls.
Well, the polls have a way of changing, after all, and I would consider it grossly disloyal on my part as president of the party to start planning a convention when none has been called.
I know. No point in me asking about your own leadership aspirations, because you have none.
That's right.
At this moment.
Because I'm president. I would think using the chair of the presidency for that kind of a run would be really improper.
What do you think about, what do you think of what's been happening in British Columbia with Mr. Bennett, who has certainly proven to the nation at large that it is possible to trim a bloated civil service?
He has, but he has done it in a way that no one can, I think, accept who has any liberal philosophy about them. Because restraint means that you take the policies you have and you cut them back, restrain them, which is what we've done at the national level with 6 and 5, with the Lalonde budget and many other things. We've been cutting the civil service in Ottawa since 1976 and got it way below its usual GNP involvement.
You mean it's not increasing at as fast a rate?
By a long shot, and we've done it by attrition and by early retirement and other ways. And there hasn't been this gross kind of firing without cause, end of civil liberties type of performance that we've seen here in BC. What we're seeing here in BC, and I'm a British Columbian and will be till I die, it seems to me, is a whole new social experiment. Now, the Fraser Institute may be exceptional economists. If you like their point of view, I don't, but I don't in any way worry about their economic ability. But they are not social scientists. They have not been social scientists, and what we're seeing in BC is a social experiment.
Do you think that Bennett is being led around by the nose by people like Michael Walker?
Well, it would stand to reason that certain of his economic theories have come from the Fraser Institute's writings, obviously.
Don't you think that Mulroney will be attracted to the Bennett philosophy and attract all good Tories in that direction because of the vast anti-union bias in this country today?
Well, it's not only anti-union, it's anti-women, it's anti-anyone who doesn't fit the norm. You know, what we had here during the election campaign for a year and a half in advance, the powder blue machine, cousin of the big blue machine that worked here, is working for Mulroney, the same kind of thing. He's made a deal with the Ontario organizers. And I think that that organizational system carries with it a certain view of how to handle the public.
Do you think that Mulroney's a dangerous type of right-winger? By any chance?
I don't think Bill Bennett is. I've always thought Bill Bennett was a good man who wanted the best for the province. I just think the right-wingers in his cabinet and around him have gotten control of him, that's all. And you know, Bennett came here in the summer with a hidden agenda. In fact, he denied certain things that he subsequently did do after he took office. And of course, Mr. Mulroney is carrying a hidden agenda. The only thing we have to go on that is our friend John Crosby's recent statements when he said, don't ask me what our policies are, elect us first and then we'll tell you.
Don't you kind of find it difficult as a Liberal to swallow Pierre's peace mission while at the same time he's giving the Americans permission to test a cruise over here? Even Peter Newman calls your policy and the Liberals' policy a deliberate lie on the cruise.
Nobody ever accused Mr. Newman of being a Liberal. I think that...
Oh, no, it's establishment, both ways, Liberal, Tory.
Yeah. Okay, look, the Prime Minister and I have had a huge, ferocious fight over the cruise in front of a whole executive, so it's no secret. I disagreed, and it was public. But when I finally got to discussing it with him, you know what he said, it's like playing a poker game. You either ante up or you can't stay in the game. We can't stay at the NATO table if we don't provide something. This is not bringing nuclear weapons on our soil, and it is allowing us to stay at the table to negotiate. Therefore, it has some validity. And
seems so hypocritical, doesn't it? Flying around the world in peace missions and not knocking anybody's peace mission, but allowing the cruise to be tested.
Jack, you're just like everybody else. They all
you're against the cruise.
They give a two-faced way of looking at peace, you know? One way they say, oh, well, Trudeau shouldn't be doing it, and the other way say, well, we hope he does all right. You know, we're facing the worst situation in the history of the world since 59 to 62. Those were the worst years I can remember previously. And this man has made his whole life, every reading that you want to do of him, every bit of his history and background has prepared him for this moment. It's not by accident that Canada is the nation and that Canada's leader is the person. We are, after all, directly between the USSR and the USA.
Leader of what? A peace movement that's going to be effective?
Leader of Canada, and Canada being the person that's going out and seeking a third force to try to bring together these two extreme factions.
I'm beginning to think that a lot of Canadians might begin to think that it's time. We've got no armed forces anyway. We know they're a disaster.
Got 80,000 standing army.
But they're disastrous.
I think they're wonderful soldiers. I've seen them all over the world.
Our equipment is the oldest in the world.
They are so good that everybody in the world wants them for their logistics support.
Maybe it's time for Canada to unilaterally disarm.
Well, you'd better vote for Mulroney because he wants a big build-up in defense. At the same time, he's going to cut
I'm going the other way.
Oh, you're going...
When I see these American bombers hit at the Syrian satellite bases, I shudder and think the end could come tomorrow.
Yes, it could.
I'm more afraid of the Americans than the Russians at the moment.
Mr. Reagan has a clock in his head that's always set at high noon.
He's the Gipper. One for the Gipper.
He's the international sheriff.
Iona Campagnolo, you're a busy woman, so I'm going to take calls to Iona Campagnolo, who has the gall to think the Liberals could win more than one seat in British Columbia in the next election. You do, don't you?
Yes, I do. I believe in the philosophy. That's why I've fought for it all these years. It's not just in liberalism here. It's liberalism as a...
Your calls to Campagnolo on the future of the Liberal Party. In BC, there is none, but federally, who knows? After the break. Do they call you Madam President?
Oh, at the meetings. The meetings are huge, 55 people. It's a three-ring
But
circus.
it's Madam President.
Yes.
Is that not sexist?
Well, I don't care what they call me as long as I have the power.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Iona.
Good morning.
I was wondering if you were hoping that we get the Liberal members in BC, that how are you going to justify when you got 4 turncoats of the present British Columbia government, and whether Trudeau will go back to being a turncoat like he was in the first place? Would you mind giving your answer, please?
Yes, I'll give you a couple of answers on that. First of all, on Pierre Trudeau, I imagine you're implying that he was once a member of the New Democratic Party. He never was. One of the people who gave me a lot of information on that is Senator Thérèse Casgrain, who was for 9 years the leader of the NDP in Quebec in the 50s, and he was never a member of that party.
He was a supporter.
Yes. Now, on the 4 turncoats, as you call them, the previous Liberal members, Mr. Williams no longer belongs to that government, but those who have stayed have obviously espoused the social credit philosophy of the right. They are no longer philosophical liberals. Philosophical liberalism embraces social reform and a mixed economy, and that's very, very succinctly put. But I do not consider them any longer to be liberals.
One thing, at least Mr. Trudeau has been consistent since his vicious attacks on Lester Pearson over the Beaumont missiles about nuclears in Canadian soil.
And there has been no nuclear weapon brought on the soil during his time as Prime Minister.
No, there was during Pearson's time, that's right. I think there was. I forget.
Beaumont.
The Beaumont.
It was
Oh, we've got genies over at Comox. We've had nuclear warheads at Comox.
Yes.
On the genies.
They will be
phased out.
Yes.
Coming when CF-18 comes, they don't carry genie warheads.
That's
Go
right.
ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack, Mrs. Campagnolo.
Hello.
I'd like to ask you, why don't you quit federal politics, in the sense of, I don't want you to quit the Liberal Party, but maybe you should come out here to BC and hook up with some good Liberals like Gordon Gibson, and let's fight Bill Bennett on our own home turf with strong people like you.
Well, you know, that's a temptation because I love my province. But I must tell you that when I look at BC right now, I still don't see, I see all these 50,000 people marching in the streets in search of a leader. I see solidarity as a sort of a broad-based coalition that is someday going to coalesce into some kind of a political party. I would like to think, you know, Jack used the words this morning, common sense, middle-of-the-road philosophy is what I think we need here in BC. I think there's a deep longing in this province for some moderation, for some calm leadership. But I don't think it's me. I think it has to be someone who's 35 years of age that's going to have $500,000 put in the kitty so they can spend 4 years working in the province and doing the job that has to be done to build a party from the ground up.
What about Gordon Gibson?
Well, you'll have to ask him. He's the head of my reform committee right now for the whole party.
$500,000 fund to give them 4 years to build up.
That's right.
35 years of age, male or female.
Doesn't matter. The best.
You're not that old. Iona, you're only 51.
I'm 51, and I've worked very hard since I was 10.
Don't look a day more than 50. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mrs. Campagnolo, I wonder, after 15 years in office, how your leader can have the audacity to think there is anything left for him to destroy in Canada that he hasn't already meddled around with and just turned into an absolute rout from a fiscal point of view.
The fiscal point of view that you espouse, of course, is one that I hear often. I often get that kind of a statement in Ontario, where they've been 41 years in office and following much the same system. 16 years in office, yes. I believe that fiscally we have a fairer Canadian community than we used to have.
Looted Canadians' earnings and savings.
Well, I think you're wrong.
Hunger for Canadians' earnings and savings. He has an insatiable appetite to govern. He can't stop himself.
Well, I'd like to argue on economic points, but you seem to have an insatiable hatred, so I can't really talk to you about it.
Thank you. Nice, though. I like to get these calls, you know, because there's so much truth in what he says.
Oh, really, Jack?
Yes.
Where would you be without the Canadian government? Can you see any other part of the world where we have, since 1971, gone up 21% in the standard of living? You know, take a look at it. Take a look at the facts and figures and
do you know the
them out.
unemployment in British Columbia today? 13.5%.
Indeed, I do.
Do you know that we've got more civil servants than people in this country, ma'am?
People? You don't consider civil servants people?
That's a joke.
All right.
It's a bit snide, mind you, but it's a joke.
I think it's a pretty crappy joke.
Yeah, okay. I accept that. It's a crappy joke, but I'm not going to withdraw it. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Did I understand you say that you've cut back in Ottawa? Since 1975, you've been cutting back on the civil service?
76, yes, we have, and it's been done by early retirement and by attrition, and it's been going on at a regular rate without the kind of excesses that we have seen here in BC.
Except that your Crown Corporation people and your vast control over the industry by things like the CDIC are very worrying, aren't they?
Well, you know, we have a saw-off. We believe in a mixed economy. We believe in a strong private sector and a strong public sector, too, where necessary.
Go ahead from Powell River.
Yes, Mrs. Campagnolo, you and your Liberal cronies have the nerve to attack the Premier of BC in regards to his restraint program. How very sad for the Liberals, because they can't even clean up their own backyard, and you could have introduced restraint and brought our deficit down. It's very sad indeed to have the Liberals in power.
All right, now take a little bit of a look at deficits. Federally, when a federal government goes into deficit, it borrows its money in Canada. The interest that's paid on it is then taxed, and the tax goes back to the people. Provincially, when you have a deficit, the money is borrowed outside of Canada. The interest that is paid, there is no return to the people. So a provincial deficit is very different than a national deficit. And in addition, you take a look at our record financially. Since August of 1982, we have gone down from 21% in interest rate to 9.45%, give or take 1 or 2% at this time. We have also reduced inflation, and we are down now below 5%. And that 5% reduction, when we in Canada did more than 5% reduction, at the same time the USA did 3.6% and the United Kingdom did 4%. We have a good record,
Never
sir.
sell me numbers. The National Energy Policy was the one that took all the current monies out of the spending pockets of Canadians, wasn't
Only 50% of our oil industry is going to be Canadian. Do you want it to belong to the Seven Sisters forever?
Well, it was easier for us. We were in better shape when 95% was owned by the Americans, the British, and the Dutch.
Don't tell me that you want Canadian resources to be owned offshore.
Of course I don't. They can be taxed. We can take them anytime we want. But when you did introduce the NEP, it put Alberta down the tube and affected all of it.
And there have been 366 wells drilled successfully this year, whereas 3 or 4 years ago there were considerably less.
Must have another segment with Iona. Short segment with Iona after the break.
Got lots of calls.
Go ahead to Iona Campagnolo, President, Liberal Party of Canada.
Hello?
That's
Hello,
you.
go ahead, sir.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Sorry, nobody said it. I wanted to ask, I'm not...
Oh, my mistake. I took the wrong call. Hold on, please. Please forgive me, everybody. Go ahead.
Hi.
That's you.
Yes? What was wrong with that first guy, Jack?
Well, I took it out of order. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi. I was just wondering, is it true that Mr. Turner has bought some property in North Vancouver? It's going to ride in North Vancouver?
I don't know. I keep reading in the press that he's joined the Vancouver Club. He's going to run in Quadra. He's going to run in Capilano. He's going to run in North Van Burnaby. Nobody's told me.
You don't think it's logical, do you?
Anything's logical.
Don't you think that a man like Turner, with all his big Bay Street connections and his tenuous connections to the West Coast, some local associations, is bound to run in Toronto?
There's no escaping the fact that the next time we have an election, it's the West's turn. Either party's going to have to deal with that. I don't know if Mr. Turner has any of these intentions or if anyone else does for that
Well, he could
matter.
beat Bill Clark. But then again, almost anybody could beat Bill Clark, perhaps.
Well, they haven't lately.
No, he's got a good organization, hasn't he? But I don't think Turner... I'll bet you... What can I bet you? I'll bet you Turner runs in Toronto.
I bet he runs in Ottawa.
I mean,
His old riding.
One of the shameful things you did, of course, was dump Ray Perot just so unceremoniously and put some couple of little creatures from Toronto into the cabinet.
My goodness, what a dreadful thing to say about Céline Hervieux-Payette.
She's not from Toronto.
Oh, well, she's in the sport ministry.
Yeah, but there was a couple of other ones. I think Toronto got 2 extra cabinet ministers because you've given up the West.
Given up the West. What do you think I'm doing this for? My health?
Keith Davies given up the West.
Well,
when they dumped Ray Perot. Ray was a good spokesman for British Columbia. Well respected, well admired.
Ray was the solid rock of British Columbia. Politics is cruel. Heaven knows there's some terrible things go on in the name of political life. It happens all the time. Judy LaMarche died of a broken heart. I mean, we can go through all kinds of things if you want to. It's a horrible situation at times, and I don't like what happened to Ray Perot better than anybody else.
Good. I'm glad you said that. Now we'll go to one. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, Miss Campagnolo, I'm not going to discuss economics or anything, but I would like to know how you feel about the situation that you have a Liberal government who has one minister is caught committing forgery, another minister's got $400,000 gift and barely escaped going to jail,
And
he was acquitted. He was acquitted. He was acquitted of the criminal charge after a preliminary hearing of the criminal charges. I, however, have expressed my reservations publicly about the House of Commons all-party committee into the Mackesy affair.
Bryce Mackesy has been exonerated by the courts.
Correct, he has been exonerated by the courts, but it seemed to me a most unusual situation where a newspaper which has not been sued, and after thorough reporting, properly reports the circumstance, should not at least be praised by the House of Commons, instead of which it's not condemned.
You know, these kind of things happen in all parties at all times. We've just had one in Alberta. We've had one in Ontario. They are the House of Commons and legislatures are microcosms of the people that they represent.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, sometimes they have human frailties like other human beings do.
But the point I want to make is that a member of Parliament, and I'm not talking about Mackesy or any case, is entirely at the same risk when it comes to publicity about charges against them as anybody else.
I agree.
And I don't see how that can in any way...
In fact, you're more. You're more than. I mean,
yeah, but
here it is, a very public life. You live your life in the spotlight all the time, and as a result, some people get in trouble.
But it can't impinge on an MP's privileges in the House of Commons if there's a proper report.
And as for Simmons, he's paying the price of his crime.
Simmons.
He said...
oh, the tax dodger.
Tax.
Yeah. Some other newfie backbencher got a job.
There is justice for MPs, just as there's justice for anyone else. A police commissioner or anybody else who happens to transgress the law.
Go ahead, please.
Mrs. Campagnolo?
Yes, good morning, sir.
Are you proud that the Conservatives are practicing Me Tooism and following your leader in the peace plan?
I think it's a good thing because I don't think that the peace issue should be at all partisanized. I think it should be nonpartisan, and I hope that all parties will follow and work on it. I really believe it's a Canadian and world issue. I don't think it's a Liberal or a Tory or an NDP issue.
A bipartisan policy between Mulroney and Joe Clark and Trudeau would be good.
Well, I think that Joe Clark could work well with Pierre Trudeau.
Certainly better than Sinclair Stevens.
Well, Sinclair Stevens is a known firebrand. Did you see what Flora MacDonald said about him? She said he was the best preserved specimen of the 17th century she'd ever met.
Good for Flora.
And you put that in external affairs in this tinderbox situation?
I'd like to see you and Flora battle for the prime ministership of this country one day.
Well, I like Flora. She's having trouble with her new leader.
Go ahead, please. I should ask you, what trouble is she having with her new leader?
Who knows? I can't comment.
Hello?
You just planted
Go ahead,
the seed.
sir.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Campagnolo, I don't mean this is a frivolous question, but you all know how important business psychology is, and I know tons of people who will not invest any money in Canada and are sending it down south of the border as fast as they can go as long as the Liberal Party's in power. Have you given any thought that perhaps you may be performing a disservice to the country by staying in power?
Well, I really seriously doubt that because Canada is one of the most stable economies in the world. And on top of that, you know, we in British Columbia have a good example of that. In the time when Dave Barrett was Premier, we used to hear all the time about industry fleeing British Columbia, how there would be less capital invested and so on. Now we've had the extreme right take over with a new and different economic policy. The result has been paralysis. Excuse me, the result has been a paralysis which has caused people to view this province again as an unstable environment. So right or left doesn't work, center works, and moderation works. And I frankly believe in passionate moderation, whether it's economic or any other way.
My thanks to Iona Campagnolo. How many speeches coming up before Christmas?
Oh, I don't know, I'm off to Yukon.
Off to Yukon?
Yes.
My thanks to Iona Campagnolo, Liberal leader, Liberal President of the Liberal Party of Canada. Next, I'm going to have to speak to Harcourt. You know, he thinks that co-op housing is great. What do you think of it?
Well, I think co-op housing is wonderful as long as the people who live in it really do need it.
And not the 100,000 a year people.
If there's $100,000 a year people, they should be buying it off the regular market. They probably believe in a good, strong, free enterprise system.
Thank you. That'll annoy Harcourt for a start. After the break. It was Moira Farrow in the Vancouver Sun, a very seasoned reporter indeed, who started talking about the gravy train of co-op housing. I've never had any great doubts about co-op housing, except that No, I never had any great doubts until these questions were raised. And now we're told that the federal government itself, or rather a report to the federal government, has said that it's a subsidized sham, that far too many people with far too much money are getting in on the 2% mortgage money when they themselves could afford to be in the public market buying or renting their own housing. That is the present allegation made against subsidized housing. Is that not so, Mr. Harcourt?
Well, it is, Jack, and the federal government, unfortunately, aren't telling you the whole truth. The CMHC officials, they aren't telling you that that exact report was thrown back in their faces by the cabinet as a totally inadequate document, nor did they tell you that the summary of the report that those senior bureaucrats in CMHC put together doesn't accurately reflect what the report says.
But
the report says, let me finish. What the report says is that the program is essentially housing people who need affordable housing, and it says, secondly, as the City of Vancouver has said, that there should be some changes to the program to make it more effective.
To make it more effective.
Right.
But the fact remains that after the Faro expose, a number of, at least one highly paid CMHC official had to move out, and allegations have been made that other people of high income levels are occupying some of these kind of developments which get 2% federal subsidy mortgage money, right?
That's right.
What do you think about it? Do you think it's a bit of a scam, a subsidized scam?
Absolutely, I think it's a scam. The Act allows 15% of the people in there to be, or insists that they be income tested, whereas 85% of the population in any co-op can be non-income tested, no limits on their income or their assets. And I think that's a scam.
Well, Jack, you can make those kinds of outrageous statements, and
is that an outrageous statement?
It is an outrageous statement.
Is he right?
No, he's wrong.
What part of it is wrong?
He is wrong in the sense that we have reviewed the 6,000 or so social housing units there are in the City of Vancouver, and we find that the program is housing low and modest income people. We have also found that there are some high income people in the co-ops who could be in the market, but instead of criticizing the co-op program and trying to get rid of it so that we can allow income supplements so that we can have rip-off artists like Zen and Aquilini increasing rents 100% and a bottomless pit in the public purse, which is what income supplements would lead to, Jack, a lot more wastage of public money. What we should do is to reform the program and say, listen, that co-op program with 2% mortgages was designed when mortgage interest was supposed to be 7 and 8%. That's the problem. It's the program has to be revamped. Don't criticize the co-op concept.
He is now conceding to you, Mr. Kennedy, that there's something wrong with the program. And he's saying basically that the federal subsidy of 2% mortgage money should be amended. You would agree with that. What is this 2% mortgage money?
Well, it's simply the fact that no matter what the interest rates are, whether they're 20% or 10%, mortgage rates are subsidized right down to 2%.
For all of the inhabitants of the co-op?
For all of the inhabitants of the co-op.
That is factually correct, isn't it?
And there is no change in the rent.
Is that factually correct?
No, because
the overall mortgage is subsidized down to 2% for all of the inhabitants of the co-op.
What he's not telling you, and what the critics are not telling you, Jack, is that the people who are in the higher income range in a co-op pay far more than the low and modest income people.
There's a maximum.
But they pay far, far more, and they pay as close to the market rate that they would rent a unit as you can get. Now, the reason for that, and the reason you have some high-income people in the co-ops, is because our provincial government here refuses to give an income supplement to people on welfare and to lower-income people so they can afford to live in a co-op unit, and therefore you have some higher-income people in those co-ops who pay far more so that they can subsidize the low-income person internally in the co-op. So I'm saying again, revamp the program, but don't toss it out. It was designed for another era. It needs to be reformed. But, these people who want to have it all done in the private market are going to cost us a heck of a lot more taxpayers' money to subsidize the private developers.
Well, now, he agrees that there are things wrong with co-ops.
Yes.
And that is basically the 2% mortgage subsidy helping people who are not income tested.
That is correct.
And you said that only 15% have to be income tested.
That is correct. That's spelled right out in the Act. That is the law.
So 85%.
Section 56(1) of the National Housing Act.
Jack, listen, you can make those kinds of lawyers' arguments to you blue in the face. We have found, and the CMHC study, if you read it, that 80% of the federal subsidy money is going to people making less than $15,000 a year. It is serving the people who need it.
Well, that's not what the federal report said. It said that almost 30% of the projects have no low-income dwellers at all, and that only 1.3% of those in need of housing assistance are actually getting it every year. 1.3%.
That's a totally different issue. What they're saying is that there are a lot of low-income people who aren't living in social housing projects who need some aid. No disagreement. There's a terrible situation for a lot of people out there. But their own figures show, and our study that we did of all of the units in the city shows that it is housing low and modest income people, and 80% of the taxpayers' money is subsidizing low income families.
How would you amend this? Are you totally against co-op housing?
Basically, I'm totally against co-op housing. I would like to see total income supplement for those in need.
But that just creates ghettos, doesn't it?
I'm not sure it does. I think if I am in need and get a supplement, I can blend into existing stock unknown to anyone else. It's not visible at all.
But there is an element in our society, a substantial element, whom we used to put into ghetto housing, did we not?
That's right, Jack.
It was absolute ghetto housing, and that was all low income
and they don't work.
And that didn't work. So co-op came up as an idea where you could have a mix of different incomes, but it's become a scam because of the lack of proper income testing. Is that it?
It hasn't become a scam,
social housing is also...
It hasn't become a scam. That's the point I've
said 5 times. There are too many people living in there.
There are a few people who are making a good income who could be living elsewhere. But let's look at the 95 to 99% who are low and modest income people, who are living in good housing, where they have a secure environment, and the taxpayer is getting good value. My point, and I've said this to Mara Farrell, I'm saying it to Bill here, I'm saying it to you, is don't toss the baby out with the bathwater. Because if you go the route that the HUDAC people are talking about, they're saying put low-income people into landlords' buildings like Zen and Aquilini so they can rip off the taxpayers with an endless array of rent increases.
Stop concentrating on Zen and Aquilini.
Well, 100% increase in rent for senior citizens, Jack, is absolutely ludicrous.
That's one man, one company.
That's one man, one company.
There are a number of thousands
all the way around.
I'm saying that there are a number of thousands of units of rental housing that are going up 50 to 100% in rent, and that's what rent increases would lead to, is even a more wastage on the public purse.
We've won the battle this morning, Mr. Kennedy, if there is a battle, in that the Mayor of Vancouver, who is a great advocate and proponent of co-op housing, would like to see it concentrated more on people who can't raise the capital to buy a house or go into fancy apartment housing. But he's prepared to concede that the income levels must be better tested and that nobody with substantial incomes, least of all CMHC officials, should live in them. Is that correct?
Jack, that's the City of Vancouver's council position.
Is that correct?
Unanimously approved that we want to see it better targeted.
How many of yours are income tested? You don't know.
No, what I'm saying is we want, when we make land available, and the city's done a good job of this, to a co-op group, we want to see who they're going to house, because we want to make sure that they're low and modest income people. But I'm saying if you take the solution...
15%.
No, most of the co-ops in the city of Vancouver have 30 to 50%.
I know, but what should the requirement be? 65%?
Well, listen, I'm not going to go throwing numbers around right now. What I am saying is that the program works. It needs to be changed because it was designed for another era.
It's been a partial scam.
And I say it's been a small bit of abuse, like any other system. But it's a good system and it works well.
Kennedy and Harcourt after the break. Somebody here just said, I don't know whether it was Mark or Mike or it wasn't Bill, that the bureaucrats are out to smash the co-op housing system because they want to go to rental aid. Is that right?
That's right.
You said that.
Yes, I said that, Jack.
You're accusing federal civil servants of having an uneasy plot against co-op housing.
That's right.
You believe that?
No, I think they want to make their programs cost-effective.
And they're not at the moment, you say.
We have a $30 billion deficit in this country today, and we can't afford to throw away money on subsidizing people who don't need it.
That's right. So you know what they want to do? They want to throw it down a bottomless pit of income supplements so rip-off landlords can rip off the public even more.
Well, the only thing I want to make sure is that the public is conscious of the fact that there are elements of scam where highly paid people, least of all CMHC officials, shouldn't be in on a 2% gravy train.
Number one, CMHC officials should not be living in that housing. It was correct they got out. Number two, and let's make this very clear, the reason there are some higher income people in those co-op housing units is because this provincial government in British Columbia does not assist families. To get more low-income families into co-ops, you have some higher income people pay more to subsidize a low-income person.
Okay.
So I think that's an important fact to realize, Jack.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Harcourt.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious how you can possibly justify some of these half a dozen $100,000 a year characters you've got around City Hall who pretend to be traffic planners and city planners, and all they do is throw up obstacle courses around the West End.
His bureaucrats are perfect. It's the federal bureaucrats that are a bunch of finks. Isn't that right?
Right.
Well, that's the battle of the barricades in Shaughnessy and the West End, and I think that battle was resoundingly won by the people in the West End and Shaughnessy in the last election.
I see. What, further
they want to protect their neighborhoods, sir. The people in the West End and Shaughnessy want to protect their neighborhoods.
Let's talk about Kitsilano. You send a flying squad of firemen around Kitsilano to berate the poor, hard-pressed landlords with some very fancy, highly engineered ideas to upgrade their poor basement suites, and you're just forcing them right out of business.
Well, what he's talking about is we're saying that these fancy Dan ideas are smoke detectors and fire escapes. I don't call those fancy Dan,
highly
Jack.
engineered.
I want to talk about co-ops. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, is that me?
That's you.
Yeah, I just think that overall the co-op plan is pretty good. I think in a system like that, you're going to have abuses. You're not going to be able to get away from them because of the nature of the system. But I just don't like the idea of Harcourt getting on this program and taking gratuitous shots at landlords and the provincial government as a platform for an election coming up.
Well, I'm not, sir. I am not taking gratuitous shots. They're free in the sense that I'm not being paid to come on this program. But believe me, I don't like to see landlords causing a lot of grief for our senior citizens by jacking up their rents 100% when people can't afford it, and it's unnecessary. And secondly, it is true, this provincial government has refused, is the only provincial government that has refused to sign a Section 44(1)B deep subsidy income supplement to low-income families. They have abandoned families, and that's a fact.
Hold it, Mr. Premier. We'll come back to that later. I'm talking about co-op housing. Go ahead, please. I'm not talking about co-op housing. I'm talking about co-op housing with you. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, but I'm voting regarding, and I'm really happy you're all there this morning. Good morning. But what I'm voting regarding is I just wonder how welfare people get in there, because you have to have your down payment before you can get in. And at the moment, like I pay $4.11 and I'm on assistance, and I have to take $70 a month out of my food budget in order to make ends meet. And if I didn't go out and do a few odd jobs to make my extra $100, I wouldn't make it. And how do the welfare people get in there without a down payment? You just can't.
Hold on, ma'am. We can't do a program this morning on qualifications for co-op housing. That's easily available from any one of the housing. Columbia Housing will give you all the qualifications, and it is possible, is it not?
But you see, what I'm trying to get across, Jack, is a balance. It's a balanced approach. I don't disagree with income supplements. We've recommended there are a lot of senior citizens that would like to live in their own apartment where they are right now, but they can't afford to pay 60% of their pensions to rent. If you don't have a rent regulation for the usurious rent increases, it's a bottomless pit of government taxpayers' money. We're saying, secondly, you have to build affordable new co-op and nonprofit housing.
Well, we don't mind that, and he doesn't mind that, providing you don't have a big open loophole door for people with money to get in and benefit from 2% federally subsidized money. Is that correct?
That's our view.
And it's a good view. From Sydney, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. I'm a little concerned with Mr. Kennedy's credentials, and I'm also concerned, I really don't know what HUDAC stands for.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have explained that. HUDAC.
HUDAC is the Housing and Urban Development Association of Canada. It's an organization of mortgage lenders, materials manufacturers, builders, sub-trade contractors, suppliers, and developers.
Yeah, this
and consulting engineers, architects, all those related to the housing industry.
Excuse me, but isn't this something of a, isn't there an interest for you to be taking this stance? Seems to me that anybody who, from your point of view, like you're probably in real estate yourself, I mean, you don't want this co-op housing, and it strikes me as there's a vested interest for you to oppose Mayor Harcourt on this issue.
Not at all. we have an organization of builders, and a lot of them get jobs, building co-ops. And a lot of them don't agree with our stated policy, but they take these jobs. Nevertheless, we are interested in the fact that when the government goes out and spends money, that they get top dollar.
And that's my interest too, Jack, and that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. And I also want to put a bit of perspective on this. 100% of the housing construction in this province is done by private contractors.
Non-union.
Union and non-union.
Mostly non-union.
75% of the housing constructed every year, which is between 25 and 35,000 units a year, is done by the private market entirely, from the building to the sales to the financing. So we're talking a maximum of 25% where there's some subsidy of some sort. Above and beyond, by the way, the free capital gains people have on their house, the first-time homebuyer program that people have had, the homeowner grants, so homeowners have had a good break in this country.
Agreed.
So I'm saying the co-op program and the nonprofit program is 10%, less than 10% of the housing in this province.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Webster. One of the problems that a lot of people are not looking at is the land itself. You know, like these big builders, they own the land, they put these co-ops on it, and then what happens? Who's going to own the land at the end of, when the federal money has been supplied, you know, that 2% tax, and at the end of the time, who gets the land? How do you share up these co-ops? Like, it has to be handed down from family to family to family.
No, they're not.
No. The cooperative owns the land.
Yeah. And
the building, all the way through. The tenant or the resident is a shareholder, in effect.
And all he gets out is the value of his share at the time of his sale.
That's right.
And he has no capital gain.
That's right. And not only that, Jack, in Vancouver, we lease our land to the co-op so that it stays in the public domain.
Oh, I think co-op housing is good. I've always thought that. I just was appalled when I saw at least one CMHC official living in there.
He's
and
out.
I saw the figures from this federal report, which I don't know to be a bureaucratic scam. You say it is, which says that 30% of the projects surveyed have no low-income dwellers
That's
at all.
not so in Vancouver, Jack.
That's what it says.
Well, I'm telling you, in Vancouver, in the co-ops in Vancouver, 30 to 60% of the people in those co-ops are low-income people, and the vast majority of the others are medium-income people making less than $20,000 a year. And there are some higher-income people in there. The reasons I've said are to help the low-income people with their payments.
Good. How is the housing business? Yuck?
Right now, it's not active, not terribly active.
You mean it's yuck?
Yes.
It's yuck at the moment. How is the
But it's not. It's at this time of the year. We don't expect too much.
Mr. Premier, Bill King is running. Ipso facto, you are not running now. Is this correct for the leadership of the NDP?
I'm going to be able to make up my mind in January, as I said to you 3 months ago. That's what I was going to do.
And you're going to make up your mind in January?
I'm going to make up my mind in January.
How dare you desert Vancouver for Expo 86?
Well, that's one of the problems, is the city is on a roll. It's a very exciting city. To be the mayor in 83 to 86 or 87 would be a real challenge, Jack.
I don't mind if you go for the NDP thing. You've got a good chance of getting it, obviously. But wouldn't it be a riot if we had Rankin and Pure running against each other for mayor? I mean, that would be fun, wouldn't it?
Weren't we talking about cooperatives?
No, we're finished talking about that
I
now.
see. Sorry.
We're just having a little social call. Bill, I'm glad you came along this morning from Hudak. Hudak. And for you, your worship, as ever, do you want me to sign a note to get your car fixed?
I'll tell you, that was annoying. I said I was going to be on time this morning.
How many
I had to take a
times
taxi
has
to
your
get
car
out here.
broken down coming out to the station?
Twice.
Flat tire the last time.
Flat tire.
And mechanical problem this morning.
This time it wouldn't start. I took it into a very good group of guys, spent $270 on it, and the darn thing wouldn't start. So they've got it back again.
These people, Mayor Harcourt expects that car repaired because it's only been fixed how long ago?
2 days ago.
2 days ago?
Right.
$270. You tried to nick the mayor for and it breaks down again. Not that he would use public pressure to get it right, but I would.
Listen, before I go, I want to tell you what I put on your Christmas card.
Christmas card.
May I wish that your handicap goes from 18 down to 12 so I can finally win some money off of you. You're a gopher.
You're a much better golfer than I am, Mr. What's your name again? Harcourt. One day, Premier of British Columbia, perhaps, if maybe January you'll decide.
Right.
Then you've got to beat Bennett, which is easy, of course. My thanks, Mr. Kennedy. My thanks, your
My
worship.
pleasure. Jack?
I have next to introduce you a most distinguished Canadian, the Honourable Paul Martin, after the break. Paul Martin, a very distinguished Canadian politician, who I remember way back in the 40s when he was Minister of Health and Welfare, am I correct?
That's right, Jack.
External Affairs Minister, candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party, High Commissioner to London, involved in many major events, and you've written a very public life. If I were to ask you, sir, of all the Prime Ministers you served under, with whom did you feel the closest? Because you served under four,
I served under four: Mackenzie King, Celeron, Mike Pearson, and Trudeau. Well, I think I felt fairly comfortable with all of them. Each had their merits. I think that as the manager of the affairs of the nation, Celeron was the best. I don't think that means that he was the best. The nuclear weapons. Mr. Pearson had changed the whole program of the Liberal Party. He said it was only a one-time effort, but he did. As a matter of fact, he won the opposition of Trudeau at the time. Trudeau was not in opposition, it was not in Parliament, but he is now trying to undo not so much what Pearson did, but the very serious state of the high level of the nuclear arsenal on both sides.
Isn't it kind of sardonic to look back and think that Diefenbaker was the man who said, jowls quivering, no American nuclear warheads on Canadian soil? And was that not the issue on which he came head-on with Kennedy?
That's right. And that was the issue on which he fell. He lost 3 ministers. He had Howard Green, that distinguished statesman whom we saw yesterday, on his side. But the reason that we opposed Diefenbaker in that matter was because Diefenbaker had made a commitment to NATO, to Eisenhower, and to the Canadian people. And Pearson felt that a commitment having been made by the duly constituted government had to be observed. And that was why he reversed his position and ultimately that of his party.
And here we have Trudeau in an almost similar, a parallel position, whereby we are committed to test the cruise missiles.
Yes.
And it's quite obvious Trudeau in his heart of hearts would want no part of anything with an atomic warhead tested or without one tested.
I'm sure. But Trudeau was a prisoner, like any Canadian government that continues to be a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This commitment of the cruise is a NATO decision, and you're either in an alliance or you're out of it. If you're in it, you have to observe what the majority want.
You're telling me, and you're the first person to say this with lucidity and clarity on this program, that the Canadian Prime Minister, be it Trudeau or be it Mulroney or whoever, or Pearson, is a prisoner of NATO.
As long as we stay in NATO, we must abide by its decisions or get out. An alliance is an alliance. It means that every member of it participates in its obligations. That's what it is. And I will be dealing with this at some considerable in the second volume, although I touch on it in the first.
More with Paul Martin, the Honourable Paul Martin, A Very Public Life, Volume 1. Volume 2 is just about finished, isn't it?
Well, I hope to have it out by the end of this year. I hope.
After the break. The first part of Paul Martin's book, A Very Public Life, deals with his somewhat humble origins, correct?
Yes, right.
But I'd like, before we get to your humble origins, people can read that in a bleeding book, is for you to go back to 1947. When were you first Minister of Health?
I was in 46.
What kind of social security system did we have in 1946? I want people to kind of count their blessings when you look at today's ramifications of Social Security?
Well, at that time, we had unemployment insurance, which came in a year after the war. We didn't have unemployment insurance or any social measure whatsoever except small old age pensions during the Depression from the 1930s to 35, 36.
That'd be about $20 a month.
$20 a month with a means test. But in 46, we had family allowances. We had brought in unemployment insurance in 41, and we were then giving consideration in the department which I then took over from Brooke Claxton, who did so much in this field. Then we began to consider the Universal Old Age Security Program that has evolved into the most comprehensive and high-level pension of any country in the world today. Then we brought in hospital insurance and laid down the basis of what ultimately became a Medicare program. During the time that I was Minister of National Health and Welfare, from 46, December 46, to our defeat in 57, most of the structure of Social Security was evolved. Now, I'm not saying that I was personally entirely responsible.
No, I was just going to give you a little jab in that and ask you if you would concede that the party and the man who led Canada in the direction of our present system were two people, Wordsworth and Tommy Douglas, and the CCF.
Well, I think Tommy Douglas did a great deal in the field of health. It was his government in Saskatchewan that brought in the first health insurance measure. But as he himself has acknowledged, it was the grants and aid that we brought in during the time that I was Minister of National Health and Welfare that enabled him to go ahead with Medicare before any other province did. I've never denied what his government did. I've never denied the idealism of Mr. Wordsworth. I have never denied the contribution of any political party, but I have strongly affirmed that the essentials of the Canadian Social Security Program were brought in the governments of Mackenzie King, Louis Saint-Laurent, and Mike Pearson.
And even I can remember hysteria in the country, long forgotten now, that family allowances were brought in specifically for the benefit of encouraging larger families in Quebec. Do you remember that?
Oh, I remember that as the argument.
And that was a hot issue at the time.
That was a hot argument. Family allowances were actually conceived by the Deputy Minister of Finance in Canada, Cliff Clark. The government was, because of the exigencies of war, forced to do something about controls in the income of the workers, and therefore he conceived as a means of supplementing the inadequacy of the wage level of bringing in family allowances.
Do you think we've gone too far? Do you think that the Canadian of today, and you had a hard-hewn upbringing, the Canadian of today is so affluent, generally speaking, and spoiled, that we've become an apathetic nation, that we've become soft, that we've had too much too easy?
I don't think so. We often say that. I think you can have too much of anything. I think you can have too much big business. I think you can have too much big trade unionism, although I have always been a champion of the latter. But nevertheless, I think that in our form of society, our economically interdependent society, it is essential that in order to take care of the dependent groups, the state, through general taxation and general sharing, help to provide something that was done earlier by the church or by the small community or by the family. That was where Mr. Saint-Laurent and I had great disagreements.
Yeah.
He thought
it should be done by the church and the community.
And the community and the province, that the federal government shouldn't undertake something that the province could do better. I didn't agree with that, and nor did his government. And in fairness to Mr. Saint-Laurent, he accepted that. He accepted what was a cabinet decision.
Yeah.
I have no quarrel with him as a man or as the man who administered our affairs. I've said earlier what I thought about him.
Isn't it funny, though, just speaking a little bit philosophically, that to be a prime minister today, this very day, you could be the most brilliant, practical politician in the world, but if you don't look the part and can't be merchandised, you're wasting your money.
Yes, I think that's
Isn't that
true.
a shame?
Yes, I think it is true. I think we have to get back to real values. Charisma has its place. Take Franklin Roosevelt, and I speak of Franklin Roosevelt, whose son was a contemporary of mine at the Harvard Law School, and I say something about him in the first volume. Franklin Roosevelt was not only a great political leader, but he had a great understanding of the limitations, but of the necessity of meeting the requirements of the masses of the people. And you can't preserve the democratic political system unless the governments take into account the needs in our form of society of those who do need help.
Totally agreed. But when you look at the political future of this country today, it's all very well to say that we are represented in Ottawa by scores of, I'm talking about the West, the alienated West, represented by Tories and NDPs. Surely there's something very far wrong with the political structure in this country when two provinces, all you've got to do is get elected in two provinces and you can hold the nation to ransom.
Yes,
How can we break that?
Well, I think we could break it. It has happened before, you know. There's nothing new. I remember, well, look at Laurier in 1917. Laurier was deficient in 5 provinces. He had votes in all, but he had very few votes in 2. And look at the pendulum has swung back and forward. I remember when I first went to Parliament, the Liberal Party had a great representation in the western provinces. In the next election, it began to drop, and that continued continually until the present time. I hope that will change, and I think it will change.
With a new leader?
Well, it depends who the new leader is. He might be a new Liberal leader. I don't know.
Who would you like to see as a new Liberal leader?
Well, I'm not involved in the political process.
To ask you.
It was inevitable, but I will make up my mind when the time comes, Jack.
I could tell you off the air, but I won't ask you on the air. Paul Martin, the Honourable Paul Martin, a very public life. After the break. In the 30s, which you talk about in the book, were there dangerous political moves in central Canada? What I'm getting at was the Depression was a thing of which many young Canadians know nothing.
No, the Depression of 1930s was unbelievable. My city was typical of the worst.
Windsor.
Over 60% of the people were on relief. The stores were closed. Some of the most prominent people today were on relief.
What was relief for the benefit of young people listening?
Relief was a public assistance through the province and the federal government.
Cash?
No, you'd go to the relief office and you'd get food, you'd get rental vouchers, no cash. Medical assistance was administered through the city, but again paid for in necessitous cases by the province and by the federal government. There were quarrels between the federal government and the provincial government as to the amounts from time to time, but it was a depressing period. I went to Windsor to practice law in 1930, just when the Depression was at its height. I was fortunate. I went into a big law firm, and I didn't personally suffer the inconvenience of so many others. But there was no government assistance other than direct relief, which was demoralizing in the case of healthy, able-bodied people who wanted to carry their share of the burden. There was no social legislation, as we said a moment ago, except for the $20
It was about that time that you first ran for politics.
I ran
1930...
in 35.
35.
And it was the incentive of those conditions that caused me to go in for the second time, this time for the first time in the federal arena. But we had no social legislation, no family allowances, no unemployment insurance, no disability pensions.
What kind of victory did you have?
Well, I won by about 1,000 votes, but which wasn't very much. This was an election won by Mackenzie King against Mr. Bennett, the Prime Minister during the period of Depression. If I had been in Windsor a longer time, I'd like they would have won more handsomely. Actually, as I say in the book, my majority wasn't very impressive. I was called a man who'd just come into the area to run for Parliament.
A carpetbagger, really.
I was called a carpetbagger. But I've been there 55 years since. And while I didn't win the first election with a big majority, in 1957, when my party was defeated by John Diefenbaker, I had the biggest majority in Ontario. My majority when I last ran was over 25,000. In 1968, when I left the House, in 1965, when I left the House of Commons.
I noticed you yesterday, Mr. Martin, at this luncheon put on by Jack Austin. You didn't miss a name.
Well,
I put my hand out.
Well, you don't miss a name.
No, but I put my hand out and say Jack Webster, hoping I'll get the name back if I haven't got it. But you have this incredible political memory for people whom you met 50 years ago.
Well, I am blessed with a good memory, I guess. But I think most people... I met a man on the street when I was leaving the Vancouver Hotel this morning, and he stopped me. And he said, "You're Paul Martin." I said, "Yes." "And you're Jack McEwen." This is a man I had known when I was a boy. And it was pure luck that I remembered him. I could just see the McEwen features. I am blessed that way, and that helps. You know, when Laurier used to meet people, Laurier was my ideal, and I emphasize this in the book. Laurier would meet someone and he'd say, in the long lineup, "And how are you? How is your old trouble?" And the person would look at him in amazement and say, "Remember, Sir Wilfrid Laurier remembers the problems I had." Yeah. And people would ask Laurier, "How do you remember that woman's problems?" He said, "Every woman has a problem."
That's terrific. I was going to ask you, here we're coming up to this. You were determined, your ambition was to be Prime Minister of Canada.
Well, my ambition was to go into public life. And I thought if I went into public life, you should aspire to do the best job you can. And I thought the most influence could be through that job. But I didn't get it, but it didn't stop my zeal for public life.
You came pretty close.
Well, not too close.
Well, you were External Affairs Minister, you were High Commissioner to London, United Nations.
Well, in terms of posts, I have had my share of the responsibility, but I was beaten by Mike Pearson and beaten by Trudeau. In the case of Mike Pearson, I was beaten by a man who had won the Nobel Prize at a time when falsely Mackenzie King had indicated that there was such a thing as the principle of alternation.
That's what I want to ask you about.
Which doesn't exist, and which the Liberal Party should never emphasize, because if it is a Liberal Party, surely the direction of that party is open to anyone, of any race or of any culture.
Was it Mackenzie King who started this?
He was the one who laid that down when he retired. He was afraid that someone from other parts of Canada, and he wanted Mr. Saint Laurent. And he was right in wanting Saint Laurent, because Saint Laurent was an extraordinary man.
So we've only now had this automatic change of succession between King, Saint Laurent,
and Pearson.
Pearson.
And Trudeau.
And Trudeau.
Yeah. When I ran against Trudeau, this was also another issue, that it should be a Frenchman from Quebec, and not a three-quarter Frenchman as I am from Ontario, you see.
Fluently bilingual.
So the quicker the Liberal Party gets rid of that principle, the better for its liberalism.
And choose the best man they can find.
Well, I think they have chosen good men. I'm not saying that I would have been better, but I have done my best.
A very public life, the Honourable Paul Martin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jack.
After the break. Tomorrow morning we're going to look at a little story about Eagle Ridge Hospital. out in the valley, and I've got an American specialist in traumatic care coming here. I want to get his name right. What's his name? Dr. Trunky is coming tomorrow morning, and another local doctor. And we'll be covering the top of the news as usual, whatever. And we might have something on the ALRT problems. I don't know, I haven't seen it yet. It's done. Sometimes they get cooked in the oven and they come out over roasted and you can't use them. And no belly dancers tomorrow. But I'll be here at 9 a.m. precisely.